Morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. I hope that music gave you a little bit of energy for today's session. I'm Isabel Nolan, Director of Programs at Startup Canada, and you're very welcome to our third Startup Global webinar of 2025, Setting Up Shop from Local to Global. To begin, I would like to acknowledge the land on which I'm on today is located on the unceded and traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. It's also known as Vancouver. And as we are a national organisation, I would like to acknowledge with respect the diverse histories and cultures of all Indigenous peoples of this land. And I encourage you to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional territory that you're residing on today. We invite all of our attendees to introduce themselves in the chat. I can already see a few people are doing that already. So feel free to share your name, LinkedIn, organization, and maybe where you're joining in from, and just make sure that you're sending all of your messages to everyone in the room. A little bit about Startup Canada, if you're not familiar with us. We're a national nonprofit that is the gateway to Canada's entrepreneurial ecosystem. We're here to connect entrepreneurs with the support, community, and tools that they need to build a successful business in Canada. And Startup Global is one of Startup Canada's flagship programs that supports entrepreneurs looking to export and expand their business internationally. From webinars like today's, roundtables, and our annual pitch competition, this free program will help you build your international market entry strategy and plan. So all of this wouldn't be possible without our incredible partners. So I want to thank our co-presenting partners, UPS and Export Development Canada, as well as our program partner, TD Bank, our ecosystem partner, Forum for International Trade Training, otherwise known as FIT, and our community partners, GS1 Canada, Communitech, and WeBC. Before we get into today's discussion, we have two representatives from two of our partners that will be providing some opening remarks on their partnership really with Startup Canada and Startup Global. So first I'll pass it over to Felipe, who is the Marketing Manager of Small Business at UPS Canada. Over to you, Felipe.
Thank you, Isabel. Good afternoon. Before starting with my opening remarks, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the land on which I'm joining this webinar today. I'm located on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, and the Wendat peoples. The land is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuits, and Métis people. Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We recognize and are grateful for the enduring presence of Indigenous peoples on this land and the knowledge they hold. As we come together for this webinar, let us reflect on the importance of truth and reconciliation and commit ourselves to ongoing learning and respectful collaboration. Good afternoon. As Isabel said, my name is Felipe Sarique. I'm the Marketing Manager of Small Business for UPS Canada. Thank you for having me today from local to global webinar. I'm glad to be here to kick off our session. I'm proud to say that we had long-standing partnership with Startup Canada, and over the years have provided significant support to many small business owners through different practices and programs, such as exporting bootcamps, on-site event consultations, mentorship programs, and the most recent Women Exporter program. In today's webinar, you'll be learning about the essential factors to consider when preparing your business to successfully compete in new global marketplaces. Some of the many benefits of expanding your business globally includes increased sales, global brand exposure, lower production cost per unit, and mitigating risks. Exporting can significantly reduce your overall business risk if you diversify revenue streams instead of just focusing on a single market, thus creating a safety net for your revenue. There are just some of the many benefits of reaching out to new markets. At UPS, we are always available to help you navigate the world of exporting. As a global logistics leader throughout the years, we have gained a breadth of expertise on everything exporting, from tips on clearing customs and understanding custom forms to country-specific regulations, and the plenty of shipping options available to fit your budget. We also continue to champion small businesses through the many tools we offer to small businesses so that they can compete with the industry giants. We focus our efforts on innovation and continually invest in the latest technology. We've developed cutting-edge software solutions that easily plug to your small enterprise or e-commerce business. There is always a UPS professional available to help you find the best shipping solutions to help your business grow. No matter the size of your business, we continue to support entrepreneurs reach their goals locally and globally. You may also begin with a discount offer on domestic and international shipping, as well as the support of the team of UPS ambassadors ready to get you started. Whether it's offering reliable shipping solutions, industry expertise, or the many available tools, UPS Canada continues to support Canadian entrepreneurs. I hope you all enjoyed today's session. We look forward to collaborating with you soon. Thank you. Back to you, Isabel.
Thank you so much, Felipe, and thanks so much for joining today's webinar. I'll now pass it over to Kamal, who is the Regional Manager of the TD Women in Enterprise.
Thank you so much, Isabel. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kamal Jaffrey. I'm Regional Manager for TD Women in Enterprise, Central Canada, supporting small business banking, and especially women-owned businesses. And I'm so grateful to be the part of this webinar and to have this opportunity to share a few words. Just a little bit about myself and what we do at TD. I'm part of the team which is dedicated to support women entrepreneurs and help them overcome barriers. I'm sure you all must be thinking, what do I mean by barriers? We have done some research and found out that the most common barriers women face is access to funding. I'm sure men does face that as well, and building social network. And how do we help that, right? So a lot of people like how are we supporting, and how this Women in Enterprise at TD is supporting women entrepreneurs. So let me share a little bit about that. So we have a team of 300 plus accredited WeBankers. They're account managers who chose to go through additional training to become WeBankers, and they are there to support women without biases. My clients who have worked with WeBankers felt that they have somebody who is listening, guiding them when they need the most. So that's exactly what we have, a team of WeBankers who are supporting our women-owned businesses when it comes to the funding requirement, guiding them. Also, not only that, TD has collaborated, like organization called Startup Canada, and there are a few other whose vision align with ours to support women entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in general. We're kind of like hosting multiple events, like webinars, in-person events, to educate, guide, share the knowledge other people have with the people who need the most. So we're creating these webinars, hosting events to kind of like bringing that support system that you have. We're there to guide you and help you in each step of your business journey. So these are just some steps. I would say just follow me on LinkedIn. And if you have any questions, reach out to us, because we have collaborated with not only with Startup Canada, there are multiple organizations we're working with to bring that awareness, finding solution, pitch contests, and so much we're doing in the community. And at the end of the day, we also want to bring the social network where women is learning from each other. I've heard I would say your network is your net worth. And it is so true, because one person is guiding another. I've seen some great collaborations happening as well. So there's no wrong question. If anybody have any questions, reach out to Isabel. They can always connect you with me. I can guide you anything. But thank you so much, Isabel.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kamal. Thank you also for joining us for today's webinar. Alrighty, so best to get into our conversation. We've got lots to talk about with our two wonderful speakers today. So today's session will really be focused on successfully transitioning your business from a local player to a global competitor. And we'll cover key aspects of international expansion, like market research, customer acquisition, marketing, branding, pricing, all that good stuff. We have prepared some questions for our two speakers, but if you do have a question, you can write it in the Q&A box at the bottom function bar on your screen, and we'll do our best to answer it live for you. So without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce you to our two speakers. So we've got Lora Rigutto, who is the Partnerships and Community Lead for Forum for International Trade Training, and Cassy, Aite, who is the co-founder and CEO at Hoppier. Welcome, Lora and Cassy.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So Lora, I'd like to start off with you. if you could tell us a little bit about your connection with supporting entrepreneurs and going global, a little bit more about what FIT does and the support that you're offering business owners.
Yeah, thanks, Isabel. Happy to. So welcome everyone, and thank you, Startup, for having me on here today. So we've partnered with Startup Canada and specifically in the Startup Global program for a couple years now because we believe that we play a role in this whole ecosystem to prepare you, the startups, as you look to expand into international markets. So FIT is the Forum for International Trade Training. We are the global leaders in that specific training dealing with importing, exporting, global expansion. We also are the global leaders in certifying international trade professionals. So beside my name, you see CITP, that stands for Certified International Trade Professional. So that is a designation that is granted by FIT. So a lot of our trade commissioners actually in Global Affairs Canada are certified international trade professionals, as are many trade advisors at Export Development Canada. Those are our two biggest endorsements for a reason. So our Learning Center is co-branded with Export Development Canada because we believe that there is a specific knowledge and skills to be gained when you're looking to export or enter into new international markets. And if you learn about the risks and how to mitigate those risks, companies will be more successful. So that's just a little piece for now.
Wonderful. Thanks, Lora. And yes, we will absolutely be getting into the nitty-gritty in a moment. Cassy, I'd love if you could tell us a little bit more about Hoppier. How did it get started and where is the business today?
Yeah, so I started Hoppier about 9 years ago, and I started with my brother. And when we first started, the business was very different than what it looks like today. We pivoted so much, and we went through so many ups and downs. It's been such a roller coaster. But today, what we do is we make it easy for organizations to send gift cards and money around the world to their employees or clients. So you can think of us as a tool to send a lunch or a gift or a reward or incentive or sales incentive or research incentive. We work with some of the biggest educational institutions in the world. And so we have about 1,200 customers around the world that use us to send gift cards and money to over 60 different countries.
Thank you. And I'm so excited to have like a service-based business on one of these webinars. A lot of the time, I think when people think exporting, they're really just thinking about a product-based business. So obviously there are differences when you're going to a different market being service-based. So very happy to get your perspective on those things. So market research, I feel like that's the number one thing that entrepreneurs should really be thinking about, rather than just thinking, I'm going to go global, going to sell everywhere. So to both of you, are there any key indicators and metrics that Canadian businesses should be achieving in their domestic market first, so they can confidently say, we've built a solid foundation and we're truly ready to consider going into a new market? Maybe Cassy, I'll go to you first and how you approached it.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in just like selling. Like I think people sometimes have like paralysis by doing too much research. And so for us, like, we got we entered an international market. We entered all the international markets we're in by just selling and then figuring things out. And then I think like we started to do research after we got those first few customers, or as we got into discussions even and started to, build relationships and get into the sales cycle. Like you get into a meeting with someone from Germany and they go, oh, hey, just to let you know, like we've got a team in these different countries and we need to do translation. And then also we need this, like, because you guys were sending these gift cards to these people in this other country, we need to make sure that you have this certification or GDPR or whatever it is, right? And so like we would just try to sell, and then like one thing leads to another, rather than just like doing research. yeah, kind of learn as we go. That's always been my philosophy, and it's worked for us.
You sort of, in a sense, the like throw the spaghetti on the wall, like let's just see what sticks and what goes, and like kind of run with that, and then using that information afterwards to go from there, I guess.
Yeah, I think like the problem I see, like I mentor a lot of young entrepreneurs or first time entrepreneurs through the University of Ottawa. They have this uh, this program for student entrepreneurs. And the thing, and I've been doing it for many years, and even with ourselves and friends that I have that have started businesses, I probably one of the most common mistakes I see is like people just don't, get out there and sell. And I think it's a challenge that a lot of like Canadian entrepreneurs have is like we're kind of humble, we're kind of quiet, we're, kind of nice. We're scared to like ask for things and like just get out there and sell. Um, but like that's you know and so when you're like getting started, there's so many excuses that you can have to take a step back and not do the thing. And like doing the thing and like starting a business, like you're selling a product or service in exchange for money. And so like yeah, I just think it's like you just got to sell, like you just got to get out there and try to sell.
Interesting. Laura, how about yourself? If maybe people um are not as brave maybe as Cassie, or they want to have a little bit of data to put forward before they're going through, is there any indicators that they should maybe be looking for?
Yeah, I don't know if it's advantageous to come after Cassie or before, but what I want to say is that that's not the approach that we take. We take the approach more that you need to be strategic. I understand what you're saying, Cassie, and it could work for some companies, especially service-oriented companies, tech companies. It's a little bit different, and the cost of entering into a market and spending a lot of time trying to figure things out. The cost for, say, product export or, say, consumer packaged goods, there's a lot of cost there. So you could spend a lot of time trying to figure out if that's the right market and understanding legislation. So, there's got to be a bit of a balance. You have to understand your industry. But I totally agree with what you said, Cassie, about there's this like decision or hesitation. There's almost like a paralysis right now. And I've seen that within the whole, let's say, this trade war and the tariffs with the United States. And they're like, well, we don't know what to do. And customers are telling us maybe that we have to wait and see. But then they're so hesitant to look at new markets, to discover new opportunities. And, I always say the best time to diversify your customers so that you could, as Cassie said, sell, sell, sell. The best time to diversify was probably 5 years ago. The second time to diversify and start exploring those opportunities is right now. So that hesitancy to like just start exploring, start doing that research. Cassie was doing primary research, by the way, by talking to potential buyers that were telling you, oh, you need this or you need that, or have you considered this, those potential German counterparts. That's primary research. I would say start for companies that are looking at expanding. You need to start with that probably secondary research to identify markets that have the greatest fit for your company, for your product service offering. And then, I have some suggestions on, what research, what data you need to look into, but we can get into that in a second.
Sure. And I think that shows like the difference in like the buyers that maybe service-based businesses aren't facing. They can take a lot more of those risks and be a little bit more creative and kind of flexible, I guess, rather than if you're product based, there's so many other components that you really do have to know before going in. We do have a question for Cassie in the Q&A box that I think would be a good like follow on from that. So Ivan is asking, what red flags have you often seen that make other companies hesitant to collaborate? So for example, sometimes Ivan sees people focus on selling and not solving or proving a real solution with value.
What red flags? Let me just pull up Ivan's question.
Yeah, a
I
lot of
see. Yeah. I think like yeah, selling versus solving, solving a problem. Well, I think like through selling, you discover if you actually are creating value. Otherwise, someone's typically not going to pay for, whatever it is that you're offering. Um, so yeah, like they will tell you if you try to, sell to them. Um, right. Like you will know if you're not creating value because they'll tell you. Um, yeah. Does that
Yeah.
answer your question, Ivan?
maybe Ivan will let
And
us know. Yeah.
and yeah, I totally agree, Laura, with what you said before. Like I probably, we do, even though we are a service business, like we do primary research. We don't even realize it by trying
That's
to
right.
sell. And
Yeah.
um and yeah, being a service company, we have the luxury of not having to, worry about some of the other regulatory things that a physical product might, right?
Yeah, if I could just add on to this about the like just for the product exporters, where one big red flag, because yes, for service-based businesses, often the cost to deliver your service in the market is a lot lower than the landed cost of delivering your product in the market. So I think the biggest red flag for me is seeing companies, startups, they get this inquiry in their inbox, and say a customer in Turkey wants to buy my my organic fruit drink and couple cases, a pallet, whatever that might be, but they don't understand the costs involved in getting their product to the market, cost of clearing the products through customs, do they have the required regulations, how much does it cost, those inspections. So all of a sudden they've made an export, yay, but then their cost is actually their costs don't cover, there's no margin to be made because they've spent more money. And also what they quoted their price, they undervalued the cost of exporting their products into the market, right? Perhaps Incoterms, like whatever they quoted their price in, maybe the wrong currency, maybe the wrong Incoterm, where they were responsible for all of this shipping and clearing it through customs and all, insurance and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So understanding cost is paramount before you look at opportunities. Before you sell, make sure you fully understand the landed cost.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Laura. And honestly, that sort of like red flag question was going to be our next question anyway, Ivan. So thank you so much for thinking ahead. I do see that Zainab has their hand up. If you would like to ask a question, you can add it into the Q&A box and I'll ask on your behalf. So when it comes to building your brand, furthering your brand rather, across borders, when you build a solid foundation in Canada, what are the different things that entrepreneurs need to be considering when they're going into these new markets? There is a lot of love for the Canadian brand across the world, but how do you write a brand story in front of the customers in new countries and markets? And Cassy, I'm curious to know, for you, what did that look like for Hoppier when you're going into new markets? Was there a lot of repositioning you needed to do? What was the consideration you took there?
Yeah, I would say definitely a little bit. Like um, like our product is so broad, right? Like people use it for many different use cases, and we kind of had to look at, okay, what what is the demand uh, for the different use cases? So like one thing we did is we looked at a tool called, we use this SEO tool, and we can see web traffic for specific searches. So I'll give an example in Brazil and in Mexico, it's really common that companies offer a lunch card to employees. It's actually a non-taxable benefit. It's considered a non-taxable benefit. And so that use case is way more popular than it is in the United States or Canada, where it's not a taxable benefit. Um, and so positioning that use case in those countries was really big for us. And so we create a ton of content, and that's probably our biggest, our biggest sales or our biggest marketing channel. And so we just create a ton of content around those specific keywords or use cases. Um, and so, yeah, just doing research to understand what are the specific use cases based on the social norms in those countries, and maybe the gap in the market, or what already is kind of working and what there's demand for.
Love that. And I guess that ties into that market research and of, when you started selling there, you're understanding the patterns and trends of your customers there, and catering to that. So that was really great example. I'd never even heard of that before. That's pretty great. I'd love that benefit myself. Lora, what about you, for entrepreneurs bringing their business, product or service to a new market? What are the steps maybe that they should take in considering modifying or repositioning their brand to customers in new countries?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think that they have to start with understanding the customers, who truly are the customers in the target market, and not making the assumption that their customers are the same, or the customer profile is the same as in another market. So maybe in your domestic market, maybe you work through, like if you're a product exporter, maybe you work through distributors, or maybe you sell direct to the retailer, but understanding in the market that you're going into, maybe your customers, your buyers are another channel intermediary. Or if you're a service company, like that's what, when I was working with a clean technology company, the way we entered into different markets was completely different. We would enter as a value-added reseller, or through value-added resellers in certain markets. In other markets, we went right to the end, the industrial consumer. So we, understanding who your customers are, how they behave, how do they typically buy, understanding that, I mean, branding is, your story is part of a whole marketing mix, understanding that your marketing mix needs to change depending on each target market. So I think it's really important to do that research so you understand who your customers are. And that research can be done, and I always say this, one of the best forms of research is to attend a trade show, a trade mission, talk to multiple players under one roof. Could be, your potential partners, it could be distributors, other channel partners, it could be your competition. Find out what they're doing. It could be, a dozen people under one roof, and that's a phenomenal way to gain that, that primary knowledge, so you can set your marketing mix.
Thank you, Lora. And there's another question here for you in the Q&A box. So what might be 2 to 3 tips for a company in building trust or initial trust with partners or other companies, especially when it's in a new market? Any recommendations on making that first connection?
Well, I guess for building trust, I mean, your track record is going to speak for itself. Also, if you have, I mean, it's so different depending on the industry, but if you have certifications, if you have, if you've achieved the highest level of, certification, a standard, that's part of your brand story. You should lead with that, your quality, your unique value proposition. But in terms of, sometimes you need, again, depending on your industry, but sometimes having the endorsement of a provincial government, a federal government, like don't underestimate the value of the multiple levels of government and their endorsement. Oh, this is a Canadian company. You maybe get a warm introduction from the Canadian Trade Commissioner Service in that market. So that carries a lot of weight, and I know that by personal experience. So that has a way of, building trust quite quickly.
Thank you. And Cassy, I'm curious about, you obtaining customers from across the world. were they coming to you? Were you reaching out to them? And then what was that like, maybe landing your first customer in Germany, let's say. What was there any trust building that needed to happen there?
Yeah, I think most like because we invested so much in content and we still do, I think it's like it's almost like we create a parasocial relationship with a lot of the decision makers. And so they kind of know us and they trust us by the time that they're looking for a solution. So we've had that benefit, but we still do reach out to people. Um, we still do have like a kind of cold outreach where somebody might not have ever heard of us and we're reaching out to them. But I think the content really helps a lot to build that trust so that they feel like they know us already. They know what we're about. They know what our values are. Um, I will say yeah, some of the, some things, in different countries, like GDPR is, a big one, SOC 2, uh, some of those other certifications that might be important in different countries, are key, especially when working with large organizations. So that's one other thing that we take into account. But yeah, I mean, it's like trust is trust is everything, I think. And now more than ever, when it's so easy to start a business, it's so easy to get started now compared to before, with all the tools and resources that people have access to, whether it's like building software or, selling a product. Um, I think that like it's more important than ever to like build trust and yeah.
Mm. Laura, you want to piggyback off of that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I just came to me, of course. Another way to build trust in certain markets, you have to know the market. You have to understand that in certain markets, they want that local player. So you'll need to partner with a local player because they want that. They'll do business with somebody from their country, as opposed to doing business with an unknown Canadian company, for example. So you almost need that endorsement from your local agent, representative, whatever it might be, however you might structure it. But in some countries, that's the way it works. So understanding the markets and your industry is truly important.
Thank you. And we've got some great questions coming in from our attendees. Some of them are quite specific, so I may wait until the end to go through those. But I wanted to talk about costs because Laura, you were discussing costs just a few moments ago, and understanding the landed cost in the various different markets that perhaps you might be going to. Cassy, I wanted to go to you first though, because I'm curious from like that like a service-based business perspective. Are there different pricing models that you had to go through, different strategies you have to create, or like currency fluctuations, taxes, that sort of thing? What kind of decisions were you having to make in these different markets?
Yeah, pricing is a big one for sure. Like that's even still like we're continuously reevaluating and testing pricing even today. It's something that I think like not enough entrepreneurs do and is like pretty low hanging fruit. If you can get it right, it can be like a major game changer. Probably the easiest way to like increase your revenue is to uh, tweak your pricing, right? So, but like most people don't, really like realize that, and even us, like it's hard to do. And so, like we've changed positioning, we've had to change our pricing, we've just tested so many different pricing models. Um, like in some places, they may not want to pay a subscription, right? They just want to pay like one-time use. And so how do we accommodate to those types of customers? Or do we even want to, do we even want those types of customers? Because maybe we pay, $1,000 in marketing to acquire them through ads, but then they spend $1,000 in software fees, but then we never see them again, right? Whereas like another comparable customer, they might spend a fraction of that, maybe $200, but they spend $200 a month on an ongoing basis for years, right? So those are all like considerations to make, and I think that that like you just have to continuously test pricing. And I'll say like maybe this one interesting thing is like we actually thought at some point that we would need to internationalize pricing to offer pricing in many different currencies. Um, but surprisingly, we've been able to get away with just charging in US dollars. And I think most companies deal with US dollars still. It is still the world currency. And so we charge exclusively in US dollars. Um, and yeah, that's been, kind of interesting to see. Um, how we never, it never really was a need to like offer pricing in euros or some other currency. Now you can still send Hoppier cards in different currencies, and we do all the Forex and heavy lifting in the background, so you don't even need to think about it. Um, but yeah, charging for the software fees to use our platform, it's been interesting that we can just get away with US dollars.
And I think it's such a good point you made about like always reiterating or adjusting pricing, and you're not just setting it once and that's it. Like it's always something you should be mindful of in creating your strategies. Lora, I will also talk to you about costs, but I wanted to perhaps maybe talk about tariffs just a little bit because I know it is something that is still top of mind for people, and obviously more so for product-based businesses. So with that in mind, are talking about costs, are there any first moves or resources or just kind of like top tips that entrepreneurs should have an understanding about the impact of tariffs on their business and what they can do maybe to help mitigate maybe some additional costs?
Yeah, I mean, this question comes up all the time. And I think what's important for companies to understand is that, well, one is service right now. So if you're a service provider, you're not subject to tariffs. So that's okay. You can continue doing business in the United States and navigate, all the regulatory environment, and it's okay. But for product exporters, you really have to, there's a couple of things. You have to understand your costs. Understand that your buyer, your importer might be, like your products might be subject to a tariff, but only if, so you have to understand the country of origin for one. Is your product truly a product of Canada, or are the inputs from other countries like China? And then that's subject to a different tariff. So there's a lot there. So understanding the origin of your product, it's paramount. Understanding the cost of getting your product into the market is paramount. And also keeping in mind that your customers, so if you've got customers, let's say 80% of your export business is in the United States, and you've probably built this relationship up over time. Looking at that partner, maybe talking to that partner, don't just assume that this is done, I can't export to the United States anymore. Looking to see if your product is a product of Canada and it's entering into the United States, maybe it's CUSMA compliant, could be exempt from the tariffs, but understanding that if your importer, if your buyer is still interested in buying your product, but is concerned about the price, it's a negotiation. Maybe you can meet halfway. Maybe you can talk about ways how you can reduce the impact of tariffs. So there's a lot there. So there's a lot for companies to kind of sit back and go, okay, what is this truly costing me to export into that market? What is the tariff rate that my product is subject to because it's classified as product of XYZ country? Understand the regulations, maybe understanding that you need to reach out to someone that might help you determine how to classify your product, how to, what tariff you're actually paying, because I get whiplash with all the changes, but understanding full picture and understanding that you might need to reach out to someone to get that full picture view of what your buyer is actually paying in, say, the United States. There's a lot there.
It is,
but
yeah.
I can't offer any magic bullet. It's complicated, it's messy, but at the end of the day, if you forge these relationships with a buyer with a partner in the country, don't just throw it away unless they tell you absolutely we're stopping all imports. Have that conversation, see if you can meet in the middle.
Brilliant. Thank you, Laura. And if there is anyone that's looking for more resources on tariffs, we do have a tariff toolkit that we started back in February, I believe. So we do update that regularly with any new updates, any new resources that might help you with navigating that. There was a question from Zainab in the Q&A box, but I think we sort of touched on that through your answer, Laura, in terms of selling Canadian markets in international countries. I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head with considering those costs. And to anyone who has asked a question, I will absolutely get to those. So thank you for sending those in. The next section I think that maybe people aren't considering as much is when you've landed in the new market and you've got your first customers. You need to ensure that they're looked after. You want to retain those customers as well in these new spaces. So to both of you, how should entrepreneurs change on how they're showing up for customers, or do they need to change on how they're showing up for these new customers? And are there considerations to take into account, like cultural differences and perhaps language barriers? Cassy, how did you navigate this for Hoppier?
So for language barriers, I mean, we've had, I'll say, like, it's kind of interesting. We've never actually had any issues really. But we do translation for recipients of cards. So like if you're a recipient of a Hoppier card or transfer or something, your company that's sending them out, and you're an employee or a client or partner that's receiving that card, then you have the ability to that the platform is going to be translated to you. We offer support in Spanish as well. We've actually hired someone who is fluent in Spanish, and yeah, I mean, and I think like it's definitely been interesting because we haven't had to, like, I think as we grow, probably it's going to become more and more important. But from a sales perspective, we've been lucky that like a lot of our buyers, we can get away with just speaking English. But on the recipient side, it's a different story. Like that's been challenging for sure.
Laura, how about you in terms of what entrepreneurs should be considering when they're providing their customer service in new markets?
Yeah, again, it goes back to understanding the markets you're going into. So if we have some companies that are looking at expanding outside of North America or outside of Canada, the United States, understanding what level of service you can actually afford to deliver, like what level of customer service, right? Or understanding that, it's all of a sudden, if your market is across the globe and you're not a tech-based company, and you've got, let's say, product returns, issues with products. So understanding that you may need to partner with somebody that can be your customer service arm in that market. So there's a lot of scenarios to work through. It's about understanding what you might want to, offer the same level of service and customer care that you do here domestically or in the United States, but it might not be feasible. So it always goes back to, you need to have that big picture, clear picture, understanding what it's going to cost you to do business in that market. And I love what Cassy said, and how you're going to price yourself. Like, pricing shouldn't be a quick we'll price this way. There's so much involved in pricing, and it stems from knowing your costs, and your customer care costs are part of those costs, and pricing yourself accordingly so that there is a margin to be made when you factor in all this, this value to your product or service.
And knowing your customer as well, like to Cassie's point, like, are we like, what's the return on investment if we're getting just like a one-time buyer?
Yeah.
Do we want those kind of customers, or like, who is our ideal customer that we want as well? Brilliant, thank you. All right, I'm gonna get to a few of the attendee questions. I'm just gonna read them out, and Cassie, Laura, just put your hand up on whoever wants to answer it. Jancy is wondering, so they're planning to export to a few specific countries in the EU and slash Asia Pacific. Can labeling be in English, or must it be in the official language, or is it just dependent per country? If so, like what's the time and budget they need to factor in for translation? I kind of already know the answer, but I'll leave it to one of you to answer. Laura, go ahead.
Yeah, just quickly, you're going to need to understand all the regulations in the market. That includes packaging, labeling, all that. So that's paramount. So that depends on each country you're going into.
Yeah. And even Jansen, when you're considering, you see all the labels in Canada, you'll see various different international labels. They all have English and French, and that's something that they had to consider coming into Canada as well. So yeah, it's the same for any country that you're going into. You'll need to do the research on exactly what is required and the restrictions around that. Okay, Laura, specifically for you, so Samsung wants to make, let me just read this quickly. We want to make it seamless for patients in Africa to embark on medical tourism, accessing specialized healthcare services and facilitators and providers. How can we secure a partnership, with your organization, so with FIT, to be legally allowed to offer these services to our clients? Is that something that FIT can?
No, we don't do that. So we're an education, we're a training organization, and we don't do any kind of B2B matchmaking. But what I would recommend to this person, sorry, I can't remember the name, is to associate and to find through associations or even trade missions, potential partners that might be interested in doing this. So if there's, I don't know, like some industry association, that's often a great way to find those partners that can help you with entering into markets.
It might even be worth having a discussion, Samson, with Trade Commissioner Service. They might be a good resource for you to ask them this question. And then we also did do an industry roundtable for health tech going global. So Miriam can maybe share the recording for that as well. But yeah, unfortunately, not necessarily able to answer your question, but there's a couple of resources for you. Cassy, Caroline is curious about your strategy on standing out from your competitors.
It's a good question. What works for me might not work for you, but I think maybe a good place to start is yeah, it's a tricky one. I almost want to go back to like the selling thing again because uh I'm like just such a big proponent of that for like early stage. I'm assuming like most people here are early stage entrepreneurs, right? That for the folks that are entrepreneurs here, and you're like, you're thinking about this for like the first time of how to stand out. And I think like to me, your positioning almost comes naturally a lot of the time. Like, unless you have a crystal clear view of the market and you've been in the market for a long time and you're like, okay, I've been in this market for 5 to 10 years plus, and I know all of the players and I know this is what's missing, then I think it's easy. But even still, like probably, the way that you find your differentiation is just by like selling to the market and then starting to make sense of it and understand how you fit. And it's kind of funny, like if you look at, like, I love the example of like the chatbot software. Like if you go to a website and you see the chat in the bottom right corner, there are like 20 plus companies that do over 100 million in revenue that do exactly that. It's like the website chatbot, but they're all differentiated in different ways. There's some for e-commerce, there's some that are built for support, there's some that are built specifically to do sales, there's some that are built for really niche industries, right? And they're all pretty big. Like you can create a great business. So I think like the way you truly find your differentiation is just like selling and then evolving over time and changing your messaging to reflect how you eventually fit into the market.
Wonderful. Thank you, Cassy. Caroline, I hope that that answered your question. I want to go back to, we have two sort of closeout questions. So then if we have time, we'll go back to attendees. But to both of you, what obstacles are inevitable? So what are some of the mindsets or mantras you can adopt through difficult transitions of exploring and establishing yourself in new markets? Cassy, can I go to you first? Because I know that Hoppier is a lot different than when you started out. So maybe you can kind of apply your answer to that experience.
Sorry, the question was just what?
Like what obstacles were inevitable and how did you get through difficult transitions?
Yeah, good question. Thank you. Like for us, so when we started selling, like I was working at this high growth company in Germany, and my brother was working at Shopify, and we saw uh, in the office kitchen, there was fruit and there were snacks. And nobody, the office manager, nobody wanted to be in charge of, stocking the office kitchen. And that was in 2016. And we went, oh, wow, like this is a really unsexy problem. Nobody wants to do it, but could we do it? And we thought, oh, we're just going to make some beer money and we're going to do this on the side. And then we started doing it and we realized, oh, like this is actually like a much bigger problem. And so first year we did $50,000 in annual revenue. Second year we did 500,000. And the third year we did 1.8 million. And then we were doing about $250,000 in monthly revenue. We had customers like Uber offices across North America, Wealth Simple, et cetera. And we started to build procurement software. So we realized the root issue, and this is what I talked about a little bit before, is like, how do you fit into the market? And we realized like, the real issue was procurement. Like these offices are large offices. They need to purchase all kinds of things from snacks, office supplies, equipment, et cetera. But purchasing those things is kind of a pain, and managing inventory is a pain. Managing requests from employees is a pain. And so, we were doing that and the business was growing really fast, 15, 20% month over month. COVID happens. All of our customers are these, knowledge intensive companies that can work remotely. And we basically go from $250,000, $300,000 in revenue a month to zero in 2 weeks. And I think it's like kind of inevitable, like I thought we were really unique. Like at the time I was thinking, oh, we got wrecked, woe is me. But you realize talking to other entrepreneurs is like everybody that that is successful has some kind of story like this and come out on the other side. Like we've been in business for 9 years. I think if you're in business for 3+ years, you've probably experienced something like this. um and uh and like just shit happens, right? Like shit happens, and that's just, we don't play the game of getting into entrepreneurship to not realize that these kinds of things will just inevitably happen. You can't plan. And so yeah, that was just like one of the crazy things. We have all kinds of other crazy things that happen. That's probably the biggest one where we had to totally shift the business, but it made us see, a new opportunity, which I think is an even better business today, which is what we do, making it easy to send gift cards and money around the world. It's a much better business, much less capital intensive, much easier to grow, higher margin. And so, we got here a result of that happening, but yeah, I think it's just, you get scars and makes you stronger. And yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, you definitely took, a crappy uh situation and just spun it. And like I mean, I feel like the magic word of 2020 for a lot of businesses was pivot. And you absolutely did that. And it's incredible what you've built from that.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Laura, any other sort of obstacles that you have seen entrepreneurs navigate and in going through those difficult transitions, or maybe, you know, like the low parts of a roller coaster throughout their business journey?
Yeah, I mean, I love what you said, Cassy, about your pivot, and it's great. And I think that a lot of companies right now, especially those, well, the product exporters, are at this moment where they need to pivot, or their company might not survive. Or for those that are just looking at exporting or thinking that, okay, I need to find more customers for my product, you have no choice but to navigate this current landscape and start looking at other markets for, you know, potential opportunities. So I think the biggest obstacle is, like we talked about it initially, is that inertia to do something, kind of that paralysis. What are my next steps? I don't know what my next steps are, so I'm not going to do anything. But not doing anything, your doors might not be open in a year's time. So it's important to start taking those steps, start exploring new opportunities. And as I mentioned, I mean, FIT has, if you want to take a strategic approach to market entry and global expansion, it starts with assessing whether it's truly feasible for you, for your company right now, to enter into new international markets. So we have a course that's called Feasibility of International Trade. And I do recommend that every company take that, because if it's not truly feasible, if you don't understand what's involved, and if you can truly expand into a certain market, it may not be worth it for you right now to do that. But if it's feasible, it'll have you looking at cost structures, understanding how you can price yourself, taking advantage of free trade agreements, taking advantage of other opportunities. But it really starts with you and upskilling and understanding how you need to take that strategic approach to market expansion.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for those closing remarks. We are sort of at time. So I will, firstly, we'll have a feedback poll pop up on your screen just now. Always love to collect your insights, attendees, on how we can improve, and how you've, you know, enjoyed and how useful did you find today's webinar. Firstly, I need to give a massive thank you to Lora and Cassy, as well as Felipe and Kamal, for donating your time and expertise today. Packed a lot into an hour, and it takes a lot of time and effort and energy to show up for these. So thank you both so much, as well as to Felipe and Kamal. Again, thank you to our partners who make all of this possible, our co-presenting partners UPS and EDC, as well as our program partner TD Bank, our ecosystem partner Forum for International Trade Training, and our community partners GS1 Canada, Communitech, and WeBC. We do have a few things coming up in the next few months, and we won't have any programming for the month of August. Most people are on vacation, so I think that's absolutely fine. Our next webinar will be how to leverage Canada as your launchpad for international expansion. That's taking place on October 16th. And we'll add that registration link to the chat. And then we also have 2 upcoming Startup Global pop-up pitch competitions. So this is your opportunity to win some cash for your business, and help you to get to that new market a little bit quicker, perhaps. So our first one will be in Moncton, New Brunswick, in September 17th. And then we will have another pop-up pitch in Mississauga on October 21st. We'll drop the link for both of those on how you can apply. But that is it for the whole thing. We have 1 more minute, so we'll keep the room open for folks to answer the feedback poll. But to our speakers, Lora, Cassy, thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day, and hopefully see people on our next one. Thank you.
Thanks, Isabel. Thanks, Startup.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Thank you so much.